Okay, so let's dive into this. Imagine you're at like a dinner party, right? And the U.S. presidential election comes up. Everyone's got an opinion, but you want to be the one who really knows how it all works.
Yeah.
Well, you've come to the right place. In this deep dive, we're going to break down the whole U.S. presidential election process, from like literally the first campaign dollar to that final nail-biting electoral college vote. Get ready to drop some serious knowledge on your friends the next time politics comes up.
Well, and what I think is so fascinating is how much the U.S. system depends on individual participation. And I don't just mean voting, right?
Right.
I'm talking about donating to campaigns, showing up at a local caucus, all of it.
Exactly. And speaking of donations, can we talk about the money involved in these campaigns for a second?
Right, yeah.
It's crazy.
It's a lot.
I read that there are actually NO spending limits for U.S. presidential elections.
It's true.
Is that for real?
Yeah, it's thanks to a 2010 Supreme Court ruling that basically says campaign spending equals free speech. So, like, theoretically, a candidate could spend all their money to win.
Wow, that's kind of wild.
Yeah.
So how much do these campaigns usually spend? Like, what are we talking here?
Well, back in 2008, Obama, he set fundraising records by bringing in $760 million.
Yeah.
And a lot of that came from small online donations, which was really new then.
So the internet, like, opened the floodgates for everyday people to make a difference.
Yeah, it was a total game changer for campaigns reaching out to regular folks.
That's pretty amazing. But I bet campaigns have gotten even more expensive since then, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
In 2020, Biden raised over $1 billion.
Wow.
And Trump is pretty close behind at $774 million.
Gosh.
And get this, Kamala Harris has already hit that $1 billion mark this year, and it's only October.
That's a ton of money. It makes you wonder, does having the most cash, like, guarantee a win?
Not necessarily. Think about Hillary Clinton back in 2016.
Oh, right.
She spent more than Trump, but still lost. It's a good reminder that money can't buy you the presidency.
So it's not just about the Benjamins, it's how you use them.
Right.
But even before we get to the general election, there's that whole race within each party to choose their nominee.
You got it. The primaries and caucuses, they happen from January to summer before the big election.
Right.
Kind of like a tournament with all the candidates battling to be their party's champion.
Okay, for someone who's never been to a caucus or even really understood what one is, break it down for me. What's the difference between a caucus and a primary?
Okay, picture this. It's a freezing night in Iowa. You walk into a packed school gym.
Okay.
People are huddled in groups arguing about their favorite candidates. That's a caucus.
So it's not just like a regular vote?
Nope, way more old school. It goes back to the 18th century.
Oh, wow.
Even connects to Native American languages.
Really?
The word caucus comes from the Algonquin word for advisor.
Huh. I had no idea. So how does it work in practice?
People actually gather in groups based on who they support and try to convince others to join their side. It's all about persuading people and getting momentum for your candidate. At the end, they count up everyone for each candidate, and that decides how many delegates each one gets.
Right, delegates. They're the folks who vote for the nominee at the national convention.
Yep.
So is the Iowa caucus, is that like the most important one?
It's definitely the one that gets the most attention. Because it's the first one of the year, it sets the mood for the whole primary season. A good showing in Iowa can give a candidate a huge boost, but a bad one can be tough to recover from.
So it's like that first impression that can make or break you. Any famous examples of someone who really benefited from a strong Iowa showing?
Oh yeah, Jimmy Carter in '76. He was a pretty unknown former governor from Georgia, but he focused all his energy on Iowa, spent months there connecting with voters. That win in the Iowa caucus launched him into the national spotlight and ultimately helped him win the presidency.
Wow. So Iowa can really make a president. Are there downsides to this caucus system, though?
Oh yeah, it has its critics. Some say it's less democratic than a primary because there's no secret ballot.
Oh, I see.
You know, people can feel pressure, even intimidated. It also takes a ton of time, which makes it tough for people with jobs and families to participate.
Yeah, makes sense. So not perfect. What about primaries, then? They seem more straightforward.
Yeah, primaries are a lot more like a typical election. You go to a polling place, vote in private, and the candidate with the most votes in the state wins.
Easy enough. But there are different types of primaries, right?
Yeah.
Like closed and open. What's the difference?
The main difference is who gets to vote. In a closed primary, only people registered with that party can vote.
Okay.
So only Democrats can vote in a Democratic primary and only Republicans in a Republican primary.
So if you're independent, you can't vote.
Not in a closed primary, no. But some states have semi-open primaries. Independents can choose which party's primary to vote in. And then there are open primaries, where any registered voter can vote in either primary.
Gotcha. So it depends on the state.
Yeah.
But the goal's still the same, right? Win those delegates.
Exactly. The more delegates a candidate gets in the primaries and caucuses, the better their chances of becoming their party's nominee.
Makes sense.
Oh, and there's another thing. Superdelegates.
Super delegates. What are those, like super voters or something?
Think of them as VIPs in the party. You know, elected officials, former presidents, that sort of thing. They're delegates at the national convention, even though they weren't chosen by voters in a primary or caucus.
So their vote, like, counts for more.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah.
And because they're big names, their endorsements carry a lot of weight. For example, when Barack Obama endorsed Kamala Harris earlier this year, that sent a strong message to other Democrats and probably helped her get more superdelegate votes.
Wow, so they're pretty powerful players.
Yeah.
Seems like there's a lot more to these primaries than meets the eye.
Yeah, there's definitely more to it. And things get really intense when we hit Super Tuesday.
Super Tuesday. Is that like the Super Bowl of primaries?
Kinda. It's the first Tuesday in March, and it's a huge day in the primary calendar. A bunch of states, sometimes over a dozen, hold their primaries or caucuses on that same day.
So it's like pressure cooker time.
For sure. It's crucial because about a third of all the delegates needed to win the nomination are up for grabs on Super Tuesday.
Whoa, the stakes are high. Which states should we be watching?
California and Texas are always the big ones. California, with its almost 40 million people, leans Democratic, while Texas, with over 30 million, is usually Republican.
So those two can really shake things up.
Definitely. They're like the battleground states of the primaries. Whoever wins them usually has a big advantage going forward.
Okay, let's say we've gotten through Super Tuesday, and each party has a clear winner. What happens next on this crazy road to the White House?
Then it's time for the main event, the national conventions.
Ah, the conventions. Now that's where it gets exciting, right? All the speeches, the balloons, the confetti. It's like the Super Bowl of politics.
Totally. Each party throws this massive, televised convention to officially nominate their presidential candidate and introduce their running mate. It's also a chance to get everyone excited for the election, rally the base, and present their vision for the country.
So part celebration, part pep rally, part strategy session.
Exactly. And you know they don't skimp on the entertainment either.
I bet.
Big celebrities, musical guests, the whole 9 yards. It's a spectacle meant to grab everyone's attention.
I can picture it now. A stadium packed with cheering people, delegates waving signs, everyone excited for the final showdown in November.
It's a huge moment in American politics, full of energy and symbolism. Shows you how much these elections capture the country's imagination.
Okay, so the conventions are over, the candidates are official, and we're all set for that final vote in November. It's just a simple majority rules thing, right? Most votes wins.
Well, not so fast. This is where things get a little tricky thanks to something called the Electoral College.
The Electoral College. I have a feeling this is where it gets complicated.
It can be a bit confusing. Basically, when you vote in November, you're not directly voting for president. You're actually voting for a group of electors who then cast the official votes for president.
Wait, so my vote doesn't directly count for the president?
It does, but indirectly. Each state gets a certain number of electors based on its population, and in most states, whoever wins a popular vote in that state gets all of its electoral votes.
Hold on, I'm trying to follow. So you could win the popular vote nationwide but still lose the election if you don't win enough states to get the majority of electoral votes.
Exactly.
Wow, okay. I think I need like a diagram or something to fully grasp this. But before we dive into all the nitty-gritty of the Electoral College, let's just take a moment to process all this.
Good idea. It's been a whirlwind tour of the early stages of a U.S. presidential election, and we're just getting started.
Stay tuned, because when we come back, we'll untangle the mysteries of the Electoral College and see how this unique system shapes the race for the White House.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the U.S. presidential election.
So before the break, we're about to tackle maybe the most confusing part of this whole thing, the Electoral College.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around how it works and why it even exists.
It definitely confuses a lot of people. To really get it, we got to go back to the Founding Fathers, back when they were setting up the country.
Okay.
Remember, they weren't creating a pure democracy where the person with the most votes automatically wins.
Right.
They wanted a republic, a system where people choose representatives to make decisions.
Okay, so the Electoral College was part of that.
Exactly. The Founding Fathers, they actually disagreed on how to pick the president. Some wanted a direct popular vote. Others wanted Congress to decide. The Electoral College was like their compromise.
A compromise, huh? Sounds like they weren't totally sure what the best system was.
Yeah, you could say that. They had a lot of worries, like balancing power between big states and small states and preventing what they called mob rule, if it was just up to the masses. So they made this system where each state gets a certain number of electors based on its population. And these electors vote for the president.
That's the gist. But here's the catch. In most states, the candidate who wins the popular vote, even if it's super close, gets all of that state's electoral votes.
Wait, so it's winner take all?
Yep. That's why candidates spend so much time trying to win swing states.
Oh, right. Those states that could go either way.
Exactly. They know that winning those key states is huge, even if they don't win the overall popular vote.
Okay, so if a candidate wins a state by a tiny bit, they still get all the electoral votes. Seems like that could lead to some surprises, wouldn't you say?
It definitely has. Actually, there have been 5 times in U.S. history where the person who won the Electoral College actually lost the popular vote.
Wow, 5 times.
And of course, the most recent one was in 2016 with Clinton and Trump.
Yeah, no wonder people have strong feelings about this system. So what are the arguments for and against keeping the Electoral College? Seems pretty controversial.
Oh, absolutely. People who support the Electoral College say it protects smaller states, so a few big cities don't decide everything.
So it's about making sure all parts of the country have a voice.
Right. They also say that without the Electoral College, candidates would only campaign in big cities and ignore rural areas.
I see. But what about people who feel like their vote doesn't count if they live in a state that always votes the same way?
That's the main argument against the Electoral College. Critics say it's undemocratic and unfair because someone can win the presidency without winning the most votes. They say it discourages people from voting and gives too much power to swing states.
Sounds like a classic debate with good points on both sides. It's a lot to think about.
It is. There's no easy answer, and it comes up every election. But no matter what you think about the Electoral College, it's a core part of how we elect presidents, and understanding it is important for any informed citizen.
Totally. But winning those electoral votes is just one part of it, right? There's a lot more that goes into winning the White House.
You're right. We talked about fundraising, primaries, caucuses, national conventions. It's a long road. And there's another big element we need to discuss: the media.
The media. They're always in the middle of things, shaping the story and influencing what people think. It's like they have the best seats to the whole political show.
And their role is more important now than ever before. These days, we're flooded with information from everywhere, from TV news to social media. It's a constant fight for our attention, and the media decides a lot about how we see the candidates and the issues.
So it's like they're the filter through which we see the whole election. How much power do they actually have, though? Can they really change how people vote?
That's a good question, and the answer is more complicated than you might think.
Welcome back. And now we're going to dive into one of the most powerful forces in any U.S. presidential election: the media.
Yeah, it's true. The media, they have a huge role in shaping how we understand everything, really, not just the candidates themselves, but the whole election process.
Yeah, it's like we're experiencing the election through their lens, right? We're always seeing news coverage, social media posts, opinion pieces. It's hard to escape. But how much does all that actually influence how people vote?
Well, there are studies that show that media coverage can have a big impact on how voters see things, especially people who haven't decided who to vote for yet.
Yeah.
The media kind of sets the agenda. They choose what issues to focus on, which candidates get the most airtime, and how they present the debates. And it's not just about reporting the facts, right? It's about deciding which facts to emphasize and how to present them.
So it's about spinning the narrative,
Yeah.
right? One minute, a candidate is this great leader, and then the next, they're being shown as like stubborn or out of touch.
Right.
And then there's social media where everyone can share their opinions, even if they don't know what they're talking about. It feels like this constant fight for our attention, and in the end, our vote.
You got it. Social media has totally changed how politics works. Candidates can just skip the traditional media and talk right to voters through Twitter, Facebook, Instagram.
So it's like they have a direct line to their supporters all the time.
Exactly.
But doesn't that also mean that misinformation and negative campaigning can spread really quickly?
It's a two-way street for sure. Social media can give a voice to people who the traditional media ignores, but it also makes it easier for false information to go viral, and that
Yeah.
could sway voters with stuff that's just not true.
So how do we know what to believe? It's a lot to handle for someone who just wants to make an informed choice.
That's the big question. We have to be careful about the information we see and read. Don't just believe everything at face value. Do some research, check where the information is coming from, look for reliable news sources that are known for fact-checking and being fair.
So don't just sit there and take it all in. We got to be active and figure out what's real and what's not, and be careful about those flashy headlines that try to get a rise out of you.
Exactly. Look for reporting based on facts and try to get different perspectives. And even with trustworthy news sources, there can still be bias. Think about who's giving you the information and why.
So it's all about being informed and engaged. Do our research and think critically about what we see and read. It's on us to understand the issues and make smart choices when we vote.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And remember, the media changes all the time. New platforms pop up, and the way we consume information keeps evolving. It makes politics really interesting, but also a bit of a challenge to keep up with.
It's been quite a journey, exploring the ins and outs of U.S. presidential elections. We've learned about the influence of money, the ups and downs of primaries and caucuses, the electoral college puzzle, and how the media shapes everything.
We've covered a lot, and as we wrap up, we hope you're leaving with a better understanding of this whole process, and maybe even a sense of awe and how long it's been around.
Yeah, it's a system with its problems, but it's adapted and survived for centuries, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. It says something about American democracy. But with all this in mind, what are your thoughts? How do you think this system, with all its emphasis on fundraising, media savvy, and navigating the Electoral College, how does all that affect the kind of leaders who end up in charge?
Does it really pick the best people to lead the country? Or does it favor the ones who are good at playing the game, even if they're not that qualified? It's something to think about as we head towards November.
And at the end of the day, it's up to each of us as voters to decide what kind of leadership we want. Our votes matter, but understanding how it all works matters just as much. So keep learning, stay curious, and make your voice heard. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the crazy world of U.S. presidential elections.